Okay, so our title is How to Build a Great Culture for Your Company or Your Team. Got three great people up here, and first off, I'm just going to have them introduce themselves, tell how big their company or their team is, just a tiny bit about themselves. So Vince, we'll start right off with you and we'll go right down the line.
Hello, Vince Leisey here in Omaha, running Berkshire Hathaway Home Services and Ambassador Real Estate. We have 950 agents, I believe. That changes daily. 750 of those are in this location. We've got a couple other locations that are just pure satellites without receptionists or managers, and then we do have two other offices. One we just opened last month. But the majority of our people are right here, and this is really where we have all of our events, and whether we're having grill outs or sales meetings or anything. So we try to bring everybody together because we believe it creates more energy and excitement if you have everybody together building upon each other versus each one of them separately doing things.
Awesome. Chris Kelly, I'm honored to be part of this conversation with you guys this morning. I'm with the Ebby Halliday Companies in Dallas-Fort Worth. We are three brands: Ebby Halliday, Dave Perry Miller, and Williams True. We have about 1,900 agents across this giant North Texas metroplex, and I've been there since October of last year. And prior to that, I've been with Home Services since 2007, primarily with Reese Nichols for about 12 years, and then with Home Services for about a year and a half before being asked to move to the great state of Texas.
Thanks, Chris. Trevor.
I'm Trevor Schade. I'm one of the 750 people here in this location. I run the exclusive listings group. I've been an agent since it was Prudential on through the years for 6 years now, and run the exclusive listings group. About a year and a half or so old, and we've got 10 agents on the team. And so we've had some pretty good growth with people and culture. So appreciate it. Glad to be here to help.
Okay, well, great. So let's just get right into it then. And we'll start right with Vince. If you had to pick one thing, just one thing on how to build a culture, what would that most important piece be?
If I had to pick one thing in our organization that I feel is the most important, one is I always say our organization is based on coaching and culture, and I think those two are married together. I don't think they can coexist without each other, to be honest with you. But I think the most important thing to us is really what I talked about earlier. It is the attitude of abundance and doing mastermind groups. And I think that's a foreign language to this industry is we bring 15, 16 people together, like type production, and most people think that, well, this agent isn't going to share as an independent contractor 100% commission what they're doing with the other 14 people in their group because that's their competitors in the same marketplace. And I would say that what we've found is that the best mastermind groups I have, quite honestly, are the top producing mastermind groups, where you have the top producers. You would think because they're the most productive, doing the most business, they'd be the most likely to say, oh, I'm going to keep all of my secrets to myself. And it's the exact opposite. By doing the mastermind groups with that attitude of abundance, they have found and understand that when they share what they're doing, here's their struggles, here's what's not working, here's what has worked, here's my client appreciation party, how I promoted it, how I drew people to it, that everybody in the group learns. And one of the things Darren Hardy says, and I talk about, if you don't watch Darren daily, I would highly recommend it. I know you know Darren, it's free, but is we go around the table and we ask everyone, what's one thing you're focused in those mastermind groups that's helping you grow your business right now? And what's so cool is, inevitably, every month or so, you hear somebody say something that somebody else said the month before. And so it's working. And the other thing that happens is the best mastermind groups, they share with each other. They're like, I got this listing coming on that I know is going to be a hot listing next week or in 2 weeks. And all of a sudden, those people go out and tell their buyers, and those buyers feel special now because they know about something that's going to go on the market 2 weeks before it goes on the market with anybody else. So what we have found is that you can't have this mindset of scarcity. That I believe the number one thing in our culture is that we do mastermind groups. Next week, sales meeting, next Tuesday, will be 10 people, 2 different panels of 5 people coming up here. What was your top takeaways from Explosion? We've set an expectation in our organization, no matter how successful you are, that you need to share with others. And that when you're sharing with others, they'll ask you questions and challenge you, which will allow you to rethink how you're doing business and tweak your own business. So to me, the number one thing is the attitude of abundance, born in panels and mastermind groups.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I think most of you realize the concept of mastermind came from a Napoleon Hill book way back 1937, Think and Grow Rich, where he talked about you put these minds together Let's just pretend it's two minds. You put two minds together, you create a third mind much smarter than the sum of the two. And that's what you seem to be doing right there.
Yes.
Okay, Chris,
Yes, sir.
your number one thing.
Well, I mean, I think what's sometimes unique is oftentimes we have the ability to grow a culture from scratch. And so Vince built his company here. Trevor is building his team from scratch. I walked into a company that had a 75-year history. You don't start a culture from scratch there. They have a great culture. Ebby Halliday, started 75 years ago. We're coming up on our 75th anniversary. So there was an existing culture there, but I was walking in as someone new to the company, someone new to the geographic area. And so it was, how do we take this existing culture that we have, but then maybe we mold it for what's going to get us for the next 75 years? Because it's really unique for any company, a team, whatever it might be, to be in existence for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. For something to last 75 years, clearly something right was going on. But we're in a different time now, as Alan was kind of extolling for the last hour. A lot of things are happening. And so we wanted to make sure that when we come in that we have what is the right kind of frame of mind going forward with it. So it wasn't wiping this culture from the slate, because it was great. But for me, the first thing I had to do is I had to get these people to know me. And so if you're in that position where you're not building something from scratch, you're stepping into something that they've asked you to come in, I think the first thing, and I learned this from sitting actually in a recruiting meeting with Vince, where he was asking somebody and he said, what's most important? You want to be liked or trusted? And trust, and it was this whole idea that, trust is built over years of time. And, the whole, this old Prudential insurance commercial, right? And it's like, no, it's like, you got to be liked, right? And if you're going to be liked, then they'll trust you. And ask the question of, if you've going on a date with somebody, and after the end of the date, you're thinking about, will you give them date number 2? Well, if you trusted them, but you're not sure if you liked them, would you go on date number 2? Probably not. If you like them, but you haven't really figured out if you can trust them yet, you're probably going on date number 2. And that really stuck with me. So there you go. It worked. And we went on date number 2, Vince.
Good.
And so it was Chris. Really like the thing as far as culture goes was getting out with everybody. And so we have a big geographic footprint. So we've got 33 offices over this wide area. So it was really, I spent 4 months just on the road constantly, getting out in front of everybody as much as I could so they could get to know me. And then what we've done going forward is just really trying to set a culture of where they hear or see from me every week. And I'm sharing something that we're doing every single week. And so a lot of it's done through video, because as much as I get out in the offices, even if I hit every office as frequent as I could probably hit all of them 3 or 4 times a year. And so for what we are trying to do as far as building our culture for growth going into the future, it's really about being out in front. It's about be vulnerable, be yourself, just be who you are. Let them see you, let them know about your family. Don't try to be some caricature of a leader out in front of your team. Just let them be who you are in front of them, and in turn, you get that back from them also. So it was a little bit different situation, just stepping into something that had been in existence for so long, but that's kind of the path we've been on over the last 10 months.
Great.
Can I piggyback on that real quick?
Sure.
So, because I was short on time, I didn't go into the stories, which I would typically tell when I talk about Ryan Estes, talking about like you, believe in you, confidence in you, and trust you. And I think you even said, what are those 4 things? But I would always ask an audience, I've always asked an audience, what is the most important initial trait? And the audience always, without exception, I've done this 50 plus times as I've spoken around the country, 70 to 80% of the audience always says trust. And trust is the most important end trait, especially in our business with a big ticket thing. But likability is the most important initial trait, right? So it's important to be likable, because that's that initial connection. But to believe in someone, to have confidence in somebody or trust them, are traits that take time to build. But if someone likes you and you screw up and you give a proper apology, they'll give you a second and a third chance. If they trust you and they don't like you, they don't. That's the data analogy that I usually use there. You don't get a second chance if they trust you, but they don't like you. Yeah. So it's important to understand that. And as Alan always talks, it's how you communicate your words, right? The number one question people ask when they first meet somebody is, what do you do for a living? Now, here's why that's so stupid. Gallup says 85% of the people hate their job. In America, 70% of the people hate their job. You've just asked a question to somebody that 7 out of 10 people don't enjoy talking about, right? So a much better question is, what's your passions, what's your hobbies? What do you love doing when you're not working? So we love talking about, to this whole point of building relationships, of how do we communicate a message that's more meaningful, that helps us build and nurture that relationship and take it to the next thing. Likability is absolutely essential, and it's the start of all of it.
Yeah, and so for me, it was really just being out with it. The one spot that I probably spend the least amount of my time is our home office. And so it was really important to be out with everybody, and then, again, keep your fingers crossed that they liked me.
Yeah, and I got to see firsthand they do.
Wow.
I'm just going to make a couple comments as everybody makes their little comments here. Again, it all goes back to, it seems like it's going back to that 1937 book, Think and Grow Rich, where this young reporter, Napoleon Hill, ran into a guy, Andrew Carnegie, the wealthiest guy in the world. In fact, if you put Andrew Carnegie's net worth in 2009 dollars, when Warren was worth about 60 billion, he was at 218 billion. Any case, they searches the book, and Andrew Carnegie gives him access to all these wealthy people that were successful. And again, right out of that book, the number one thing on wealthy people was actually likability, which is not what you always see. But moving along on those terms, let's go to Trevor.
Sure. Yeah. I feel like I can piggyback on both, but I have to have things broke down into very simple terms for myself, and I have to ask really simple questions. And I saw a movie a few years ago, the Social Network, the Facebook movie, in the scene where the twins first introduced the idea to Mark Zuckerberg of what they were planning to do with their website and what they wanted him to create. And the line he dropped out of there when he realized what was happening is the word exclusivity, and it was the word that actually inspired the name of our team, and it turned into a culture of the trust turned into the authenticity, because what it appeared is that agents or clients, both, they just wanted to be part of that exclusivity. They wanted to be part of something, and there was even more lines in that same movie where it was people want to be part of something cool. They didn't want to do advertising in that app. And so that was where I guess that's what we created, and what I would think is one of the most important things is that authenticity and creating atmospheres, creating environments, creating spaces and things that people want to be part of or be around. They want to like how they feel about themselves when they're around you or the team or the group. And then there's lots of different microcultures you can spawn off of that in detail, but I think that's what I would add in.
Okay, I can speak from my own experience on culture. One of the things that I found was the better, and this happens if you study like championship teams and great teams, but the better the teammates, the people on the team, the people in your 50 agent team right there, the more they know each other, they kind of like really intimately know each other, the better they perform. So one of the things I always did to build a culture, and I still do it, is I'll assign everybody an accountability partner every month, and they'll change. But on that first accountability call, there's 18 connecting questions that they would ask, and they're all like it's like an inner, it's interviews even spelled different. It's spelled interview, but it's like, so what do you do? How'd you get started? Where are you originally from? What's your current family situation? What was your family situation growing up? Were you active in school? Give me that memory that stands out. Who from your childhood had the biggest impact on you? What did that person teach you? Look at your life as a radar scope. There'll be highs, there'll be lows. What does that tell you about yourself? What does the future hold for you? If a young person was asking you advice on how to live your life, what would you tell them? When it's all over, how do you want to remember? There are 18 connecting questions. Now, if you do it in a team building thing, I would sit with Chris here, and I would ask Chris those questions and make those notes, and then he would do the same thing to me, and then you bring him up to the front and say, hey, I'm Gino Blefari, and this is my partner, is Chris. And the one thing I learned about Chris that I didn't know before was that he was an attorney at Home Services before he became CEO. And the one thing I
Don't hold that against him.
Yeah, please don't.
Recovery lawyer. Right. And the one thing I respect him about is, he went in there and moved his family to Dallas and took on this challenge. Something like that. That was one way where the team starts to build a culture because you actually know each other. Okay.
Can you expand on because I've heard great stories from Bob Watson and many who lost many pounds because of the accountability part of that. Because you just mentioned that. Can you expand upon that accountability part of that?
Sure. And then essentially expanding on the accountability part, you have your accountability partner, and the first time is to kind of get to know them, get to kind of what do you have in common, and you start to actually create a pretty close little bond. And then essentially what you're doing after that is each day you're saying, like if Doug Eddington was my accountability. So Doug, you sent me your top 7 things that you were going to do yesterday. How'd you do on it? And what would you like to work on? It's more of just a connection each week of each day of being accountable, doing what you said you were going to do, and that's the whole real purpose of it. But you essentially, when someone's my accountability partner, because we have a different one at HSF every week, I got Sue Gardino to now this month. when you're my accountability partner, I talk to you 7 days. I talk to you so I'll talk to her 31 times this month. But even on Saturday or Sunday, it's just, hey, Sue, what are you doing? How's it going? What's going on there? But you build that bond and you share so many of those stories from those 18 questions where you have something in common with the people, and it just creates a bond. And I found the closer the team is together, the better that they perform together. And all my best friends in the world are in real estate, right? And they're all, get closer and closer to my team. So,
Gino, Brooke, I think we might have that. If not, let's get that and we'll send that out to everybody attending this thing. Those 18 questions,
sure.
Please.
Yeah. Okay, so Vince, you're king of culture. You just touched a tiny bit on it. Let's go ahead and expand on a few other things.
Right. I think the second part to us that we really believe is married is kind of what I touched earlier, is that we believe coaching and culture are married together. That we can have, we've got Stella machines, we got foosball tables, we got ping pong tables, we got a workout facility. We can have the funnest place in the world to come to, and you can enjoy it, and you can have a lot of fun, and you can laugh. But that in and of itself, if we're not helping you make money to grow your business, to be more successful in this business, doesn't work, and you should not work here. But the exact opposite of that is, we can be the greatest coaches in the world. We can help you be very successful, make an obscene amount of money, but if you hate coming to work and you don't like being part of our organization, you should not stay here. To me, that's the second part. That is the most important part of this. Is there's a lot of pieces of the pie that make up a brokerage. There's the brand and the name and the tools and the systems and all those things. They're all important. But to us, those two are the key ingredients of what we work at, and I think they're tied together. So we think that those two have got to coexist together. And so the coaching is not the mastermind groups and just the panels of coming together and the attitude of sharing, but it's also being there to hold each other accountable. And so in the mastermind groups, we have these classes. There's always accountability partners and accountability groups, but it's being that positive influence. I always say that we need to do 5 simple acts of kindness every single day, right? Open the door, help somebody carry something in, tell somebody that, I like what you're wearing today, Mary Lee, and be sincere in what you're saying. Put that smile. Every single one of us has the ability to start building a great culture in our family, in our team, in any organization we are. It can start with one. The power of one is powerful. Because what happens is, when you do simple acts of kindness on a daily basis, which takes you no time at all to do, by the way, right? You can do 5 simple acts of kindness in less than 5 minutes, very easily, in less than 2 or 3 minutes. What happens is you start putting a smile on somebody's face that may be having a bad day. And all of a sudden, that's contagious. Then all of a sudden, they're in a better mindset, they're in a better mood, and that just rolls through the organization. We have a thing in our organization called the Good Guy Award, and that's given away every week from an agent to an agent for whatever reason they think the other person's a good guy. And I remember, God, this has been 7, 8 years ago, we had a guy, Gus. Gus was a guy with one arm. He was a farm boy. He fell off a tractor when he was young. He lost his arm. His legs were all messed up. He would have a legitimate reason to say, wow, I've been dealt a bad deck of cards here, right? So I remember this lady, Lynn, comes walking in one day. She's having a bad day. She gets a cup of coffee. She's just grouchy. Nothing's going right. And she says, all of a sudden, I hear this voice. And it's Gus. And Gus sticks his head up above the cube and says, Lynn, how are you doing? Isn't it a beautiful day today? And Gus is just all positive, all energized. And she says, all of a sudden, this bad day that I had, just Gus and listening to Gus and hearing his voice and his tone and his energy and his excitement for life made me think, the things that are happening to me are little things. They're not really important. It just puts life in perspective. And so she ended up giving Gus the next Good Guy Award. But all of a sudden, she said, I started having a more positive day, and I could see everybody around me being more positive. So I think that's just an important thing, is we all need to understand we all have the ability to change our environment and change our culture. And in my opinion, it starts with just doing little, simple acts of kindness and being sincere in who you are with other people around you.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. A great mentor of mine, Og Mandino, he wrote The Greatest Salesman in the World and several other books. One of the things he said in one of his books, Mission Success, he says, now I understand the secret of changing the attitudes of others, and that's to change my own. So that just jumped with what Vince said. Chris, what else can we talk about with culture?
Yeah, well, kind of piggybacking on the accountability topic is we like to talk about that. Sometimes accountability comes across as a 4-letter word. Like the first time you start talking about with your team or your group about we're going to hold each other accountable, everyone's like, yeah, I got to go do something now, and that's scary, right? And so what really we're talking about is to kind of destigmatize it a little bit. Is that accountability is the highest form of love that you can show another person. If you think about your family members, you think about your kids, friends of yours, when someone comes to you and says, I really want to make this happen in my life and I want you to help me, that's accountability. But we think about it sometimes in the business sense as something being really bad. That's micromanaging. There's a difference between micromanaging and accountability. Accountability is loving someone so much that when they come to you and say, this is what I want to get out of my life, I'm going to help you get there. And so that's a huge part of any great culture of an organization or a team is that we love one another enough that when you told me what you want out of your life, out of your business, I'm going to be here to help you get it. And one way I'm going to do that is I'm going to ask you about it. I'm going to ask if you've done your things to get it done. And then as far as like spreading the gratitude, with 33 offices, what we try to do and inspire others to do is that kind of exact thing is reaching out to others when they've done something great, whether it's their personal life or their business life. And all the downsides of social media, one of the great things about social media is when you're friends with all of your colleagues, you know what's going on in their life. And so what I do is sometimes I would sit down and do handwritten notes, and I'm like, man, I knew I had 10 things that I wanted to send notes to people about this week, and I can't remember any of those now. So now I do screenshots. So if I see something on Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, I screenshot it, and I have a little folder on my phone where I just put it like in my little gratitude folder. And that way, when I sit down to do notes or whatever, I pull it up. I'm like, I would have forgotten that if I wouldn't have screenshot it. So I've got my whole list. And so between thank you notes and then also use BombBomb a lot just to do quick videos out to people. And so we have a kind of a system in place where our leaders can say, we really want to give a shout out to this person for something they did. They supported first time they ever gave a mortgage deal or a title deal to our team or whatever it is. And they send those in. And then I sit down and I do personal videos out to everybody as well too. And the video part is a really, it's better than an email because it's you and you're saying. It was interesting. Mike and I were talking on the drive up yesterday. He did someone sent out a video to somebody and the agent's like, oh, that was really nice. How did you get my name in there? Because they thought it was like a generic video where like they were dubbing in like, hello, Walter, whatever it is. And he's like, no, that was your video. I did it for you. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And so it's super easy. It's 10 seconds, but that's kind of the accountability part. And then the recognizing them when they're doing a great job is those two things really go hand in hand for sure.
Okay, I like to end each one with, so what's the message? Now there's a couple of messages right there. One of them was he has a system. Right? We always want to write notes and we forget to do it. So if you can create a system to do that, which is a great thing to do. When I had my own company in Tarot, I would call every single person on their birthday, which is pretty simple thing to do. But you got 2,000 agents. It's a lot of people there. So I had to create a system, and the system was really simple. One of the admins would text me the person's name with the number, so I could click on that number all the time and made it really, really easy. So a lot of these things that we talk about on building cultures and improving and things like that, if you can create a system that goes along with it, the system can be just incredibly powerful.
Because if not, you get caught in the 4DX dialogue. The whirlwind of the day will take you away from doing all of those things that you really know are important.
And Gino, that is something, and I learned that from Mark Stark 10 years ago. I don't know if he learned that from you, but I know you've always done the birthdays. But here's the crazy thing, and I'm now 2 days behind, so remind me to call birthdays for today and yesterday. But it is amazing. When we have 900 agents, you had 2,000 agents, the attitude and the happiness that comes out of agents that just making that effort to make that call. I mean, they seem like little meaningless things, but they're actually very meaningful.
Yeah, along those same lines, it was culture building and growing in Tarot and building culture. We had everybody, when they'd come in, they'd send out an information form so you'd know their name, you know their spouse's name, you'd know their birthday, their spouse's birthday, you know their kids' names and birthdays. And so you had this thing where for 14 years straight, I would send a $2 bill in a card to the kid, the child of one of our agents. So I'd be at a restaurant and there'd be, hey, there's a $2 bill guy. He'd give me the $2 bill. I mean, it's just funny how, those things. But again, it had to be a system. There's no way I could do it on my own. Trevor, you were going to go.
Yeah. So when I was starting the team, one of the things that I had to figure out about myself is one of the struggles I had was I'd practiced being an agent or being driven or an entrepreneur in all these ways, and I had all these drives and these goals. And you'll hear in the different seminars and workshops to goal set and how to keep your goals in front of you and all these different great messages. And I had executed on them fantastically. And then I started trying to bring people on and coaching them through while I still had my own agenda in the mix. And so I had to equal the actual culture creation to those other goals. And so I could still pursue the goals and I could still set the goals and keep them in front of me and do all that. But I now had to learn and train myself a different way of thinking. So I was actually creating the culture on purpose the way that I wanted it created. And it changed some of my other goals. I may not have the interest of selling personally as much as I wanted to, or I may not do some of the administrative work. I may have to figure out other ways to free up some of my time by outsourcing or automating, which happened to be my background. So we talk about systems, and that's just near and dear to my heart because I'm a coder by nature, and somehow I'm in sales. I don't know. But I just had to restructure my goals, and I had to restructure my thinking, and it turned into, well, what do I want to create, and why do I want to create it? And as I've done business consulting over the years, everybody has a different answer to that question, and none of them are wrong. It was really more of a realization of being true to self. And I had to identify and think about and figure out what type of culture did I want to create and what did I want to be part of. I mean, I talked about before creating something cool. Well, everybody defines that differently. And I couldn't define it for everybody. I knew that I could just define it for me and what do I want to be part of. And so then what would I want to spearhead and be creating on purpose? And then what does that look like? And it made me slow down on who I would even bring into the team or let into the team. Or if somebody didn't like what I was creating and they weren't a good fit, I would actually help them find a better fit because they wanted to be successful and maybe they wanted more of a culture that was the numbers have been run, you make this many calls a day and it produces this many sales, and it was more of a track the numbers and it produces results type culture. Perfectly good culture. It works. It's amazing. It's scalable. There's so many great things. Our culture's a little, it's just different. There's, we have a lot of autonomy, but I'm also very rigid in setting the expectations up front for what I expect people to make a priority. If they have other commitments or other, if we're talking about, this is the only time this person's in town and they're closing on, an $8 million deal. Well, all right, you can miss the team meeting. It's fine. But we do have a
We don't have $8 million deals in Omaha, by the way. He might have been visiting Debbie in California that week.
You gotta speak these things, right, Vince? We gotta create.
Alan thinks I exaggerate. That was an exaggeration for Omaha.
So as I've talked to other people and I've had people talk about and inquire as to our team and what we are, I even had to create a system to protect the team and the culture against me because I have other agendas in the mix with bringing more people on. I benefit from that. It's good news. But with a team of 10, everybody's pretty intimate, pretty close. I don't have microcultures. I'm not as big as a whole brokerage that can sustain that. So what I did is we have 2 team policies in place. We've got I won't bring on anyone onto the team. Well, I'll go through the whole interview and I'll talk to them and I'll learn about background, sales history, everything. And if they pass that and they're good, then I'll throw something casual together with a few people on the team. And at least 2 others on the team have to vet vibe. And it's a super subjective, chill feel, but it's real. If you vet vibe, your gut feeling. You hang with somebody for 20 minutes over drinks, you're going to know, do you fit? Do you feel comfortable or do you have apprehensions? And so I'll get 6 of us together and we'll hang out and do something just that lets the guards down. And it appears there's no agenda, but really it's part of the interview process. And I want to know, do you fit? Because here's the other part. As part of our culture, I wanted team trips. I hear some teams do them, some teams don't. I put a whole sales incentive program together. We go out together, we do fun things locally, but I wanted to do an annual team trip that we hung out and it was fun and we could just relax, play, have the kids stay with other people and just do this thing. Well, I'm a beach junkie, so I knew all of these trips were probably going to be beach related in one way or another. So here's what I then broke it down because to tell people, hey, I need you to vet vibe. I can vet everything else, but I need you to tell me if vibe is there. And I said, okay, the real question, ask yourself, do you want to hang out on a beach with this person? And that's a really easy question to answer. you're hanging out with a person and you're like, you kind of suck on a beach, then why are we going to hang out every day with this person in our office? So Vince mentioned we have beer on tap all over. Well, I converted a kegerator into red wine. So we've got red wine on tap. So our team meetings get real loose. And I was like, I don't know that we want to bring somebody into that environment if we don't want to hang out with them on a beach anyways. And so I even protected it against myself and just really focused on keeping that culture pure and on purpose, and taking the time to take myself through the exercises of knowing, what do I want to create? Really? What do I want to be part of? Because I didn't want to create something because it was supposed to be right, but I didn't actually want to be part of it.
Trevor, you may be too early in the evolution of your team, but if someone gets on that and you mess up and you miss that in the beginning,
Yep.
and they're toxic to the culture,
Yep.
Teams being smaller than large organizations, will you get rid of them, and have you?
Yeah. And I had a guy that we were ready to bring on, and then one last hangout before we were bringing him on has been my experience. Prior to real estate, absolutely. I had that happen when I was learning how to build.
But if you had someone
cultures.
toxic on this team, you would get rid of them.
I would get rid of them. And I've even told, here's the verbatim what I said to the team in a team meeting. We record our team meetings, so this is even recorded. I said, I'm just enough of an asshole, I'm going to kick him off the team. I just didn't care. The culture was too important. It was too black and white, and absolutely, I'd let him go because the culture is bigger than me. I won't even let myself bring somebody on without having other people vet them, let alone some toxic person stay.
You mentioned about your goals and culture, and I think where that becomes important is if the goals are independent of your culture, which means they're independent of your ethics, is when you find yourself doing things to attain a goal that compromise your culture and ethics. And we saw that really play out in the real estate world where, brokers, their goal was so out there that we want to have the most agents in the country, right? We want to have the highest agent count. And then they found out years later, well, there were things compromised in order to inflate that, and we see it in business after business. So if a goal is independent of your culture and your ethics, then that's when you can attain a goal, but you're going to crumble your company in the process. So I think it was really important what you said there.
I think another thing, Trevor, that you said right in the very beginning, which I think everybody heard, but he said, I do a really good job of setting the expectations. And that's another way to build your culture. If you have a team or a company, you have to have your company story. And I'm going to go back to building in Terra where you were going to come in. Before you came in, you're going to sit through and here's our vision statement, here's our values, is there an alignment there? And be crystal clear the culture that you're getting into. So I would always share our philosophy was, and it's not for everyone, right? It's like don't join an easy crowd where the expectations are low or where they don't care. The problem with that is you won't grow. You want to go here where the expectations are high, where you're going to be challenged to study, to read, to learn, to develop the next skill. Because at the end of the day, the challenge creates the muscle, the mental muscle, the vocal muscle, the actual physical muscle to become better, stronger, wiser, and more unique. So that's part of the culture. And you can set that up front and kind of like eliminate maybe, perhaps, maybe the 18 questions too with your person where you bring in, because sometimes you don't get that instant vibe right off the bat, and then later you say, "Wow, I had the wrong piece on that one, and it could be really good." I want to move to something else right now, and because Vince, you took your culture, which was really yours, okay, and then we merged another company with a different culture into it. And let's talk about some of the challenges because sometimes it doesn't perhaps fit, and that's okay. So why don't you speak to that, because you have a culture totally of abundance, and maybe it was more of a scarcity culture that was coming in.
I don't know what the culture was.
Okay.
But it was without question the most stressful time of my career, to be honest with you. We had built our organization at Gino did 100% organic. We never had a merger. We never had an acquisition. Now we've been bought by Berkshire Hathaway, and they'd asked us to merge this other company in. And it was a large competitor of ours in the marketplace, but they just saw the world differently than us. And I think, I see Ralph out there. Ralph, I would say you guys pretty much were taught to dislike us. I don't want to use the word hate, but is that a fair statement? What'd he say? He's busy talking. Well, you go back to talking to Chris. But CBS as a general rule saw us as the enemy, the competition, and so when you're all of a sudden trying to bring these organizations together, they don't like you to start out with. So the likability thing, we had to overcome that right off the bat. They didn't see value, a lot of them in mastermind groups and stuff like that. It was a work in progress, and so we've now moved many of them into this location. We've opened up a new location because we shut down their 45,000 square foot facility. I said, one of the things I'm not going to do is merge these companies together and let that. I said, because see, culture, and I wrote 7 or 8 articles for John and Daryl and Risk Media. I don't think I've done it in a couple of years, but anyone that wants those articles, they're all on culture. Leave your card up here, and Brooke will send those out to everybody. You're going to send, okay, she's got a note on that. Got it. But merging these cultures was critical. And so we had to get them, we convinced, a number of them went to convention. I said, this is bigger than just us in Omaha. We started getting them in mastermind groups. We started getting them into our sales meetings. We got that new office open. But it was a real process of people that, have came to me saying, I was not excited about this. I didn't really like you guys. That finally have started saying, we see the value. Because we stuck to who we were. We did not want to change who we were. We did not want to change our culture. We did not want to change what we did with coaching and other things. But we had to get other people to understand and see the value of that. And so you've got to have, one of the things that I had to learn in that process, I had to have a lot of patience. I had to have a lot of patience, and there was a lot of baby steps in that process, not going at the speed I wanted it to go to get there. But you can, I think we've learned at this point in time, Gary, would you believe, you're down in the Regency office. I mean, that culture's probably changed night and day from where it was 4 months ago, 5 months ago. My brother Jay and I are popping down to that office once a week just to make sure that we're visible, let them know that we're there, that we care. So just showing that I care attitude, which is so an important part of that, and then they start finally believing it and seeing the value of what you're doing, can bring the cultures together. But if you're going to bring cultures together that are opposites, and in our case, close to polar opposites, you have to have patience, and you have to have an understanding and empathy of where they're coming from, and then you have to show and figure out how do you explain the value of what you're doing. And I think it's by engaging them in that process and continue to encourage them to become involved in what you're doing. But it was trying.
Sure.
But I feel like today I feel really good. I think I told Brooke about 6 weeks ago, I said I feel like we're back to where we were, where I feel really good about where we are moving forward. But it was we were on the defense for a period of time, and that's never been who we are in our organization. We've always been proactive in what we're doing and being rebellious and making decisions. I felt like we're kind of defensive and trying to defend our position, which wasn't a good feeling, to be honest with you.
Sure. Now, Chris, you had an interesting piece because not only did you come from the outside, but you got Ebby, big company, been around since Jesus was a baby, right? and then you had 2 other companies, right? So you literally came into like 3 cultures, and you're trying to blend it into one. Why don't you comment on that? And somehow you've done you're very, very likable, okay, and a smart guy, and all those great things you have, but it had to take some work.
Well, yeah, I mean, it all starts with your team. So, your folks on your team, everyone's a representative of your culture. And so I was very fortunate that we have, an amazing team of sales professionals that are in the field that have been living and breathing the Ebby culture for years and years. And Lori was talking about it last night, that it's part of her, when she goes to meet with a seller, she talks about it. Like, why would you list with any other company when this company does this in this community? And that really was impactful. And so as our leadership team, we did have some silos. And so one of the things, we've done several exercises over time, and one of the ones that we did I found to be really effective and I thought was fun, I brought a little piece of collateral to kind of show, was when I was still in Kansas City with Reese Nichols, they had done an exercise with a book called The Ideal Team Player. And so we took that book. I'm about to fall off the chair. I'm not good at sitting and talking, obviously. So we took that book, and as a leadership team, we got together, and we all read the book. And you could use any book. It doesn't really, whatever resonates with you. But we read The Ideal Team Player, and the Ideal Team Player talks about, what traits are you looking for when you're bringing someone into your culture, and kind of identifies them as humble, hungry, and smart. So what we did is we all read the book, but then we divided up our leadership team. There was the humble group, the hungry group, and then the smart group. And they went out, and then they sat and talked amongst themselves, like, what does it mean to be smart and work at the Ebby Halliday companies? And that's inclusive of all our brands, all of our business lines. What does it mean to be smart? What does it mean to be hungry? And then each of those groups came back, and they took the book. So instead of the book's words, it was their words. It was our leadership team's words, not mine. And, so we kind of came up with this card where, everyone will have one of these now, where it says, if you're going to work at the Ebby Halliday companies, and that's all 3 of our brands, any one of our business lines, this is what it means to be humble, this is what it means to be hungry, this is what it means to be smart, and this is what you live. And when we're looking to add new people, they got to fit this too. And so this was something that was self-defined, as opposed to, we read it in a book and we stole it, we interpreted it. But it doesn't have to be this book, it could be anything. But that was a really good group exercise from the leadership team that kind of broke down some silos It didn't matter which brand you were with. It was still one culture that we're going to have, and the brands resonate differently. And there's a reason those agents are with the different brands, or consumers are, drawn to the different brands. But to work here, it means one thing, not three separate things.
Got it. Yeah, and you shared that with me, and
Yeah.
I think I downloaded it on the flight back and
yeah.
listened to the thing, and
Yeah.
it was huge. So let's move now to like how do you weave in your culture, Trevor? If someone says I want to come work, I want to join the team. Let's talk about maybe the onboarding process that we do with culture.
Sure. Honestly, I feel like the most that I can do for them and also for our culture is to ask them a barrage of questions about what they're actually looking for, and giving them some open-ended questions. I mean, similar to like what we would do with a client, and giving them the open-ended questions so they can start telling me a story, and they can start telling me what they're all about, and they can slip in the little jokes, and I can get to know their personality, and I can get to know them. And it really is just even tell me where you're from. I mean, it's the soft stuff like that that'll draw out some of that truth of what they're actually into, because what I'm looking for is I'm looking for their value system. I'm looking for the top 5 most important things in their subconscious mind. And so I want to hear them speak to those, because the exercise I've taken myself through is I actually did the same. I took all the supposed tos of creating a culture and I shelved them for a minute. And I went through and I asked myself, do I want high transaction counts? Is that my actual goal? Do I want high volume counts? Is that my actual goal? Do I want a bunch of huggers? Is that like what do I want? Do I want people that hang out in the office regularly? How much? And I really got granular with what I actually wanted. Well, so that's what I'm actually trying to draw out of them, is I'm just trying to figure out how aligned are we? We don't have to be perfect, but I do want to know that our top 5 are pretty similar. And they may not know, and it may be very structured like that, where you actually have some of the defined pieces. But so I'll meet with them and I'll start gauging and learning that. And in that usually then comes also the productivity or the fears. A lot of times people will let the fears out because they're wanting to vent to somebody about that. So if you can make that connection in that friendship, they're going to let go of what they're really hoping. I have been out of work and haven't been making any money for 3 months and I need to pay my rent. Like all of a sudden you're like, wow, we're there. Okay, thank you. And so I'm looking for those points of vulnerability, those needs, and that value system, so that I can then decide whether they're, the 3 criteria there with the SMART, and I really want to know, are they teachable? Are they moldable? Are they pliable? And then I'm also gauging how long will it take to mold and ply? How much foundation do they already have? And do I have the capacity, or do I have the system in place that can mold them in that duration into what is going to actually create success for them? Again, I'm not even painting this picture around me. I have my entire team's system set up in a way that their success is my success. So I never have to measure my own success off of this. I just have to protect the culture and help them be successful, and it automatically works.
I know when Chris was talking originally about the book, where the humble, hungry, and smart, and I think your team came up with the same thing, but smart had nothing to do with being academically smart.
Thank
it was
God.
all about
Emotional intelligence. Emotional
understanding
intelligence.
people. Right.
I would have been out the door.
Anything, Chris? Anything when you on board?
Yeah, I mean so when we bring someone onto the team now, I mean that's when we're meeting with them, that's the criteria we're now using and saying, do they fit this mold? I mean, are they humble? Are they hungry? Are they smart? And then, but no one's 100% great on all 3 of those. All of us have, we vary from day to day within those, but we talk about it. Where do we see them fitting into those 3 categories? Well, I think I'm not sure if they're hungry enough. And so that's really kind of given us at least the common dialogue, right? Because I think sometimes you can be in a group of room and you can all know what you're looking for, but if you haven't decided what language we're going to use when we're talking about it, you're not sure if you're saying the same thing or not. So it's at least given us the same dialogue to use when we're talking about it.
I know we're about out of time here. One of the things that I don't want anyone to walk away from here, because I think we could talk about culture for days, Gino, you and I could go on and on and on, is that, culture, I think, is a component of things. It's the physical space that we have, but it's also the exact opposite. It's the invisible energy. And I can't tell you how often I have managers, they're like, well, that person is, I'm just like, just set up a recruit meeting. Let's find out, let's learn a little about them. But I have so many people that at the end of that process, they've seen the energy, the excitement, the enthusiasm we have with our organization, and that is so contagious. And people want to be around passion, energy, and excitement. And that energy, that invisible space, my office purposely, right, is right by the front entrance, by the receptionist area, so people can pop in and say hi and talk, and so I can be part of that heartbeat of our organization. So culture is really a combination of many things, right? It's the events we do, it's the coaching that we're doing, it's the physical space that we have, it's the invisible space. And it's finding out for yourself and your organization, how do I put all of those things together to create what we want to be as we move forward? But to us, that invisible energy is just as important, if not more important, probably, quite honestly, than the physical space we have.
Sure. I remember I was, so most of you know, I was very close friends with Dwight Clark, that passed away with ALS. So consequently, I got very close to the entire 49er organization, and especially when the DeBartolos took over the team, and they knew nothing about running a football organization, but they had this culture of family in their development business. And one of the things that Eddie did was everything was first class. That was their style, first class. And so when they traveled back in the day, back in the 80s, they'd have like these big DC-10s, so everybody'd get a whole row, and everybody got their own room, and it was all first class meals and things like that. And consequently, the 49ers still, I think, hold the record, 18 straight road game victories, and that became part of that whole family culture. So let's give our panel here a round of applause. They did a great job. Thank you for your time.